Good evening, voters. First phase of polling is done. There's 6 more to go. But tonight, India is ashamed of some of its netas and the political parties. Because when the citizen, when the voter faced all odds, braved Maoist threats, braved terrorist threats in Kashmir, stood in long queues, faced intense heat, waited for hours and hours, ran around from one official to the other, just to ensure that they get to exercise their right to vote today, they were let down by the entire election machinery. Because do you know what some of our netas and their party members were up to? Vandalism, violence. Some even attempted to distribute cash to try and bribe the voters right there outside the polling station to get their vote. Over a dozen instances emerged just from Andhra Pradesh. There was no stopping the workers, the cadre of TDP and YSRCP. At one point, in one constituency, it got so ugly that there were 2 casualties. One worker of TDP and one worker of YSRCP killed in these clashes. There was a report that emerged from Bihar that the 2 rival political sides opened fire at each other and that the mob went completely out of control. The police on spot couldn't do much. There were reports from Uttar Pradesh where people tried to forcefully enter the police station in a huge group, and the BSF had to resort to firing in the air to warn people to back off. Is this what India deserves? Are these the netas that we deserve? That's the big debate tonight on the other side of this report.
Ananthapuram, Jansena MLA smashes an EVM machine alleging that the EVM was faulty. Anantapur, 2 political workers killed in clashes between YSRCP and TDP members. Guntur, TDP and YSRCP workers clash, vandalizing the polling booth. Eluru, alleged TDP cadre attack badly thrash a YSRCP leader of a village. Chittoor, scuffle breaks out between YSRCP and TDP workers, forcing the police to intervene and lathi charge. Srikulam, TDP and YSRCP workers clash, damaging EVMs in a polling station. Bijnor, malfunctioning of EVMs caused a ruckus during the polling. Kairana, BSF personnel resort to shooting in the air to stop a large group from forcefully entering and attempting fake voting. Nevada, cops attempt to disperse a mob crowd goes awry, leading to firing between RJD and NDA camps, injuring a woman. Kurnool, clash breaks out between members of YSRCP and TDP, injuring a security personnel. Violence marred the first phase of 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Tonight we ask, who is responsible? Let's debate.
Let's say good evening to our panelists. Rajesh Sundaram joining us this evening, Kinshuk Nag, Vipul Mudgal, Juhi Singh of the Samajwadi will be with us soon, Raman Malik of the BJP also with us. We will also try and get some representatives of the TDP and YSRCP on the phone line. They've been so busy because the entire state was had gone into polls today, and of course because their party cadre were busy fighting with each other on ground, that they could not assign anybody to come and join us. But we will keep trying because they must be questioned. The silence of Jagan Reddy and the silence of Chandrababu Naidu when their men are behaving like this on ground is completely unacceptable. Let me start with Mr. Kingshuk Nag. Mr. Nag, is this normal in a state like Andhra Pradesh, or are we seeing a more intensified version of such clashes because the parties, I mean, are estimated to be so close to each other because the election is such a close call?
Andhra Pradesh is a feudal state. In fact, we call Andhra Pradesh as Bihar of the South. A lot of arms and a lot of money is used, and a lot of violence is always there during the time of elections. But this time, there's an extra amount of violence there because both Chandrababu Naidu and YSR and Jagan Reddy are fighting, because otherwise, if they lose, both of them will go under. So for them, it is a life or death battle. So they have intensified. Earlier, Jagan Mohan Reddy was supposed to win the elections. Mr. Naidu later realized that this was the case, and in the last few days tried very hard to close that gap. And so this election is very close, and that is one reason why they are taking resort to violence. And violence in this part of the country is very common. So there is nothing unusual. So why blame the poor workers? The leaders have to be blamed. But the leaders will say, what can we do? We have to survive. Because whoever loses, Jagan Mohan Reddy or Chandrababu Naidu, his career is finished. And plus there will be other problems like YSR Reddy, Mr. Jagan Reddy has a lot of cases against him. And he hopes that if he can get a lot of MPs and they tie up with the ruling party at the center, then those cases can probably be taken care of. In the same fashion, Mr. Naidu knows that if he's gone out of power, this will be the time for his end. He's about 70, getting old, and he's losing it. And he feels that if he loses, there will be no other chance. So that is why we see a lot of violence in Andhra Pradesh this time. Even though Andhra Pradesh is a violent society, this time the violence is extra.
Yes. And that's so unfortunate. That's so unfortunate because absolutely. And look at the long queues that we saw at many of these places. People lining up to cast their vote, to exercise their right to vote in such tough weather. I mean, it's extremely hot in Andhra Pradesh and rest of the country, in many parts as well. But that did not deter these people. But look at the way our netas are behaving and their party members are behaving, their cadre is behaving. They were about, in all, 15 to 16 EVMs damaged, and a large percentage of that actually came from Andhra Pradesh. The first one was by a Janasena candidate. The candidate himself picked up an EVM machine and smashed it on the ground, saying this EVM machine is not working. Mr. Sundaram, do you think it is because they know there won't be a follow-up action? There is nothing to fear that they resort to this? Why are we seeing such large-scale and, of violence and vandalism take place?
Well, like the speaker before me said, the stakes are very high for them. It's all or nothing. So when stakes are as high as that, you will see these kind of desperate measures. But also one needs to question the arrangements. You had the election commission which had planned this particular election in 7 phases. One would have expected that the sensitive polling booths and centers and places would get extra security, that these kind of incidents would be avoided, especially those in those states which have a history of such incidents happening. But there seems to be also a failure of the election commission and the administrative mechanism that was put in place to stop this. There was enough time for them to plan it, enough time for them to get the intelligence and know how desperate the politicians are in these states. So it is both ways. There is a failure on the part of on organizing these elections. And also, of course, given that there is desperation, it's all or nothing kind of a scenario for many of the politicians. This was something that was expected. It has happened despite all the planning, despite all the staggered polling that the Election Commission planned.
Mr. Vipul Mudgal, would you agree that election commission should have been better prepared, that perhaps more security forces should have been deployed? Would that have ensured that we don't see such large number of incidents?
You can never be prepared for this. I mean, you can be, probably you can control sometimes. You see, violence is a part of competitive politics. It is, every time there is a possibility of, very close election, or there is a swing seat or something like that, there will be possibility of violence. You see, in the case of the person breaking the EVM, for instance, this was happening for the camera's eye. I can tell you very clearly that if there was no camera, probably this gentleman would have behaved differently. There are times when people do things knowing full well what the impact of these things are. The electoral mobilization is such that everybody is vying for, support and mobilization of the same kind of people. And in that intense competition, violence becomes a very important part. I mean, as you said about the election commission, you see, the problem is that the center gets to decide a lot of things. The center decides, for instance, which states will get the central forces, and very often center can say to the election commission that we don't have enough forces. So if, for instance, election commission was in a position to decide, if it was more empowered, and it was able to use data to see the vulnerable profile of different constituencies in the country, and on the basis of that, you see, the entire world is doing it. You do vulnerability mapping of violent places, you do hotspot studies. People use data to do that. It's not rocket science. But one agency has to be in charge of that, and that agency has to be impartial. So I think election commission can perhaps in times to come can do it, but right now I think there is no other option. There will be competitive politics, there are fault lines in the society, there will be competitive mobilization and hence violence.
But, why should the people, why should the common man suffer? There was an instance today in Bihar where there was a clash between allegedly the RJD and the workers from the NDA alliance, and as that clash intensified, policemen and the forces deployed there moved in, and then things allegedly went so haywire that these two camps fired at each other. Now we're still waiting for a detailed investigation to find out who started the gunfire, but there was firing, and a woman who was present there had gone to vote, got injured in that firing. So, Mr. Raman Malik, there has to be some kind of solution to this problem. We can't have common citizens getting stuck in between this political violence, where I go to cast my vote, but some arrogant neta walks in before that and smashes the EVM, and then I don't know what to do, or actually get hit by a bullet for no fault of mine.
Tanvi, you're right, and you have picked up a very sensitive topic. And why I say sensitive topic is because exercising my franchisee as a citizen in a free and fair atmosphere is my constitutional right. But yes, at the same time, I am failing to see any of the major channels reporting the kind of violence, the kind of brutal, let's say, brutal misuse of the government machinery that has happened in West Bengal. Cooch Behar has been a classic case. And not just that, we had seen panchayat polls in West Bengal, how it happened. The state law and order machinery, the central forces had complained earlier also about their ways of operation. And it is not something which is new in West Bengal. It is happening since 1990s. And probably when some people started talking about moving back to ballot papers, this is the biggest fear India may face, that if you go back to ballot papers, this incidence would increase. Now, coming to this basic issue that we have raised today as a discussion point, I strongly believe that exercising one's franchisee is a duty and a right. But at the same time, the political scope has to look into it that they do not disturb the faith of a common citizen. And there, everybody is a party to it, everybody contributes to it, either in positive or negative way.
Okay, Juhi Singh, your opening comments on that. There were also, wide allegations that were being made by the BSP that their supporters are not being allowed to vote. There were reports that a group of them tried to forcefully enter one of the polling stations, forcing the BSF to respond and push them back. Now that's really unfortunate. Why get so desperate that you resort to vandalism or violence?
First of all, my right to vote is the basis of my democracy and my right to form the government as I want. And I don't think the BSP supporters really went into booth capturing and vandalism. There were reports, there were videos where the people of the BSP were not being allowed to vote, and the complaint was registered with the DGP as well as the returning officer and asked to take certain steps. But still, it was a day of the polls and the right of that family really was taken away because they couldn't vote. There was also malfunctioning of EVMs constantly, so it's really not, suddenly it's not become the responsibility of the Election Commission, because the Election Commission somewhere has taken the back seat. It's all the parties who are carrying this extra vigilant role, that if the EVM is not functioning, please complain, please get it changed, because we've been doing it since the very morning. This is the same Election Commission which also submitted the affidavit and said that we are fully able to hold one nation, one poll. So this is your preparation. This is not what we expect of our Election Commission institution. Everybody really respected. And once the polls are announced, then the central government really works under the Election Commission's orders if it chooses to exercise it. It has that much of a mandate. And if it wanted some forces to accept that violence is a part of polls, violence will be there because there are fault lines in the society, then we are probably really raising serious questions on the democratic operations itself. Then why have elections is what we are saying. Yeah.
I agree with you, and it's unacceptable that in 2019 we are seeing this kind of violence. It was unacceptable last year in 2018 when we saw, even worse kind of violence unfold in West Bengal. So I completely agree with you, but my point is the Election Commission actually turned around and dismissed the allegations that were being made by SP and BSP, saying these are rumors. There is no instance where people are being stopped from voting because they're either from any caste or supporters of any political party. So my question to you is, rather than instigating people and rather than making these comments, does your party or your ally have any evidence to suggest that this is being done?
There was a video, and every time there will be a complaint, we will immediately take it to the Election Commission. It's their prerogative that they can choose to be dismissive about it. They were also dismissive about the fact that when the by-polls in Kairana were being held, and the returning officer came out and said that the EVMs were feeling hot. So let's not just treat it as excuses. They are responsible. We'll take every complaint, and the evidence will be submitted to them. We've talked to the DGP of UP also. And those people exist who wanted to vote and were refused. So it's not as if we were pulling out a complaint out of the blue and said that people... there are many people. Let's just say that was a group of people, a family. There were also people in the field who were saying that we cannot vote because the EVMs are not functioning. They could have been BJP supporters or a number of supporters, but because somebody's, maybe my number is available, so they would give me a call, and the Election Commission can be dismissive about it. But the Election Commission has the responsibility that anybody who wants to vote should be smoothly allowed to vote. It is not the work of the political parties. And to say that the BSP,
but don't you think it is the responsibility of Akhilesh Yadav and Mayawati and Chandrababu Naidu and Jagan Reddy and Amit Shah and Mamata Banerjee and Nitish Kumar or Tejasvi Yadav to come out and appeal to all their supporters and appeal to their cadres to not resort to vandalism, to not resort to violence? I mean, we had one candidate today who came out and said it was very hot, I got angry, so I did this. What kind of a message are we sending to the voters? It was hot, so you resorted to violence.
Definitely not a very correct message. I agree with you. That's a message every top leadership should be sending, but every top leadership also must complain, which we are doing, at the right time to the right people, not resort to vandalism or violence, because that does not bring, but don't accept violence, that it is a part of the electoral process and the election commission is not empowered enough to handle it. That I think would be really trivializing the issue. It's an important election being prepared for so long. The election commission, just like it dismissed our complaints or found it irrelevant, can at least take responsibility that there should be a smooth voting pattern everywhere.
Okay, you know, Raman Malik, you wanted to respond to what Juhi Singh was saying. Quick response from you, and then I have two questions for our journalists.
The other thing that I was just trying to say when ma'am was talking, that it is not that in 2017 when the UP elections happened, this does not happen. But the fact remains, and one needs to understand the basics of it. The basics of it is that you, at the end of the day, have to be a responsible democracy, and a responsible democracy works on reasonings with logics and evidences. It does not work with rhetoric, and it also does not work on the principle of throwing an allegation and running away. So they have to understand, all of us rather in the political scope have to understand that this is not the democracy that we inherited from the time of Bharatvarsh, the Bharatvarsh that was. So we must understand that if you want to be in the political scope, you must reason it out with sustainable facts. And also, just because something is not as per your liking, you start questioning the same organization. And once they do something which is as per your liking, you say, oh, that is a vindication against X, Y, or Z.
So does that mean, Mr. Malik, I don't know which organization you're talking about right now, but does that mean that that then even your party people should not be questioning the election process and the efficiency or the integrity of election officials? Because you had a BJP MP today who came out and made a very, very controversial, seemingly communal comment as well, questioning the efficiency of election officers. And you know who I'm talking about.
See, the point is, as I said, that we should have material facts which we present and on basis of which we say.
But the EC turned around and said it's absolutely not true. We have looked into this case and we've probed, and proper checking and verification of each voter has happened with or without burqa. Women are being checked. But this man came out early in the morning and made a huge hue and cry about this. What about that? Why isn't your party pulling him up then?
But the person also said very categorically, this person also said that he will complain to the EC in the appropriate forum. Did he not say that? With his allegation, he said that. Now, that much of freedom you have to accept. But at the same point, going down and throwing a machine or going down and stopping people, there are proper videos which show. There may be evidences with him also which show that in his constituency, Lok Sabha constituency, there may be certain instances where something like this has happened.
Actually, there was no evidence because the Election Commission did investigate his complaint or the issue that he raised, and whatever Sanjeev Balyan said, and the Election Commission turned around and said, we have not found anything.
Again,
but let me go to the other aspect that you raised, Raman Malik. I take your point. He went through the proper process.
Why there is nobody trying to show what has happened in West Bengal?
Correct. So let's come to West Bengal, and that's what I was actually moving to. Violence broke out at Tufanganj area of Cooch Behar. 2 booths were allegedly captured by the TMC. BJP people then confronted these TMC workers and a clash took place. It usually starts like that between the TMC and the BJP. We've seen the kind of violence that unfolded last year in May during Panchayat elections, and this year again already in phase 1 reports have emerged from Kunch, Bihar. In fact, a BJP candidate Nishit Pramanik and supporters went on a dharna outside the DM's office saying there aren't enough central forces at the spot. Now, my question to you, Mr. Rajesh Sundaram, because you also raised this point about EC being prepared enough. We have been talking about EC preparation for West Bengal for last several weeks, about additional forces being sent in, because everybody is expecting West Bengal, to see some kind of violence. So beyond a point, can Election Commission or security forces really do something about it to stop it?
Why not? I think, the officers in the Election Commission have the entire state, the central forces under their control, and they can move them around as easily as they want. They have a lot of time to prepare for the Lok Sabha elections, and any such thing that happened, especially when sensitive booths are identified, sensitive constituencies are identified, it is fair to expect that such violence is avoided, and also that the ordinary voter has a chance to go out there and vote without fear or being subject to any kind of violence. That is the bare minimum that citizens can expect. You have a constitutional body which is entrusted with this responsibility, and if there is violence, if there's malpractice, if there are EVM machines not working, if there are people whose names are missing from electoral rolls, these are things which should be considered failures of that particular agency. So while yes, it's a huge big exercise, it's the largest democracy in the world. There are millions and millions and almost 1 billion people who are going in, and there will be these instances. Do we expect such a large number of such malfunctions and malpractices to happen? I would say no. As somebody who is a citizen, I would expect better. But of course, it is a large exercise, and certain amount of violence or malpractice one can live with, but not to the extent that we see right now, not in so many places, especially those places which are known to have violence, which have been categorized as sensitive or hypersensitive. There is no reason why something like this should happen, especially when you can decide how many faces you want to stagger something in, like Andhra Pradesh. All the entire polling for Lok Sabha and Assembly happened in one phase. Was that a decision that could have been wrong? Could they have cut that up into 2 phases, especially since that violence is expected there? Also, shouldn't more forces...
Mr. Sundaram, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. If you could just hold on to that thought, because I believe we've got Mr. Reddy on the phone line of the TDP, Mr. Petty Reddy on the phone line. Mr. Reddy, we heard from Chandrababu Naidu multiple times today speak about the EVM malfunction issue. Now, while that is a legitimate issue, because if people came to vote and they couldn't vote and they went back, it must be raised and it must be taken up. But why didn't I hear from your chief minister and party chief about the violence that unfolded, about the places where your party workers and cadre resorted to vandalism and violence?
The first point is, the independent organizations, agencies should be function independently. There should not be any ulterior motives. So AP, one phase election is not proper. We have track record. Rayalaseema and some of the fraction constituency places earlier also, those incidents have taken place. The election commission should think about that. The other states, they took 2, 3, 4 phases. Why one phase enter the state, assembly and parliament? That is one mistake the election commission has taken. The other thing is, as per the track record, the election commission frequently, they change all the officers. A new officer, once he take over the charge, he could not know what is the scenario, what is the entire the district psychology. So that also they're taken a wrong decision. And EVMs, morning 7 o'clock they're supposed to be function. Up to 10:30, 30% of the EVMs are not function. if summer is there, hardship is there, the hunger automatically will be developed by the voters. So these are all combination, the failure of election commission.
Okay, Mr. Reddy, you
first.
have pointed out very conveniently the failure of the Election Commission. Now, will you take some responsibility for your party leader and your party workers and what you have done today? Or is it all the fault of the Election Commission and YSRCP? Because let me also tell our viewers again, in Anantapur, 2 people got killed in the clashes between YSRCP and TDP. There was a scuffle that took place in Jamala Maduku Mandal. There was a scuffle that took place in Kurnool. There was a scuffle that took place in Ellur, in Gurjala. Now, please tell me, is all of this the fault of Election Commission, that there was vandalism and violence and had nothing to do with your party?
All the political parties, they should take the responsibility.
Which is your party?
Yes, all the parties, they should take the responsibility to keep the peace and quiet election. They should support.
But that is your party. Why will you apologize for this kind of behavior? You vandalized polling stations. People couldn't vote because of that, and you're blaming Election Commission.
Vandalism is not one side. Vandalism is another side. Even last minute, even Nara Lokesh, he is a contesting candidate. One Vilekari, he questioned him, why you are come over here? He started the nuisance there. He is a candidate. He is supposed to go all around the booths. That type of things has happened both sides. The provocation is from other side. Then automatically the other side, they can't keep quiet. Nobody will control. So, Chandrababu Naidu is appealed so many times. If they do anything, you quiet and you support, and we are responsible people. 3 and 4 election, we have to be maintained. All the appeals is made.
No, today he was only complaining about EVM again and again. He made no appeal today. People have died. 2 people have died, Mr. Reddy.
60,000 people, we are in the teleconference. He is quietly appealed 4 times, morning to evening. He is appealed, everybody. There should not be any violence. There should not be any disturbance. We should be support. We are in the government. We are in the administration. Whatever the mistakes has taken place, but we have to be support. He has appealed so many times. He is an experienced leader. He is not a new politician. We should not put an allegation on him. He is not a small man.
Mr. Perry Reddy,
he is in the politics.
I don't care who is how big a politician. If there is something wrong happening, it is my duty as a journalist to question those who are in charge about why this is being allowed to happen. So as much as I will question the Election Commission for lack of preparedness, I will also question the political parties tonight as to why they let this happen. I thank you for speaking to us at least and telling us that at least Chandrababu Naidu internally, multiple times it seems, sent out a message to his party men to not resort to violence, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the excuse that the other side started it. Now, Mr. Mudgal, the question then is, what does the voter do? Because we are the ones who get sandwiched. We don't get to vote. We wait in queues. We brave, the heat, terrorism, insurgency threats, and get out there to do this. What is the voter's option? Who do we blame?
You see, the problem is the most intense with the vulnerable section. If you are a voter of a vulnerable section and if you see that there is violence going on at the booth, you would perhaps not go there at all. You would not want to send your children or your parents or anybody. You would not like to go yourself. So I think the political parties are very conscious of this when they realize that it's a matter of only a few votes, and 1,000 votes can make a difference between victory and loss. So they would intentionally go there, very consciously create ruckus at a polling booth to make sure that the people of the vulnerable community do not go. Actually, you must see it carefully that the people who are creating violence are the ones who have a sense of entitlement, who are rich, perhaps more powerful, etc., etc. The other thing I wanted to say about the political parties is that we are seeing in channel after channel that political party representatives come and they wash their hands of the problem and blame the others. The point is that it's the political parties who have to come to some kind of a consensus. You know, even in war, there are some rules which are applicable. You can't do everything in war. So I think there is some kind of a consensus which is broken down in India, and now political parties are openly attacking each other. The other thing which must be noted in India is that earlier there were some leaders somewhere who would make incendiary and objectionable speeches. Today, it is the very top. The biggest leaders of the country are making absolutely outrageous and objectionable remarks. So I think the political parties should get together, probably sit together and say that this cannot be allowed. You know, it cannot go on for very long time. The common voter will suffer. You know, for instance, ask political parties, why are you giving tickets to criminals? I think it is the right of the voter to know.
Yes.
You know, so these questions are there, and I think every elections we ask these questions.
Absolutely, and not just the Election Commission, even the Supreme Court has repeatedly, pushed for more accountability. But I know you're saying something which is which should happen is very ideal, that all these political parties come together and say this should not happen. But I believe in this day and age of social media, where you can say something, there is immediate mass impact. People have seen you, heard you within hours, and by the time any authority reacts to it, stops it, takes it off, the work is done, the impact has been made, and there's not going to be any repercussion to it, so they get away with it. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge for Election Commission, for our courts to understand and figure out what should be the way forward. I believe one of our viewers is on the phone line. Mr. Raman Malik, I see your hand. I'll come to you in just a bit. But Mr. Srinivasan is on the phone line calling us from Belagavi. Good evening, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. We should know the reason why so many politicians, they are resorting to this violence and bribing of voters. They go to such an extent. Now, first thing is, what are they going to get out of this? The thing is, they are after power. They are not after service. Otherwise, why will they resort to this? There has to be those days of, people service to the people, to the citizenry for their betterment. That is gone. Now it is service for their own self. Now we should have politicians who look after the people and who go for development for the good of the people. The second thing is, the main thing, the fellow who threw that voting machine and broke it, what was the security doing there? Why he was not taken into custody immediately? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, for calling. Always good to have you share your views on our show. Sunil is on the phone line from New Delhi. Good evening, Sunil. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Tanvi. Tanvi, this is a result of a larger picture, actually. If you really see in the recent years, violence by political workers has been directly encouraged. See the environment that has gotten created with lynching, with moral policing. All these people have been allowed to go scot-free. What is happening now is that other parties too are getting ready to counter this kind of an environment. I am apprehensive that we will be seeing much more of this violence in the days to come. There is no way.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Sunil. Thank you, and I take your point. Thank you for calling us. Let me go across to Kingshuk Nag. Mr. Nag, do you think on the basis of what we saw today, that the Election Commission should go back to the drawing board, perhaps sit with the central government and drop a better plan for security deployment, and especially, for areas like West Bengal or even some parts of Uttar Pradesh?
West Bengal is a poll-violent state for a long time. Violence in West Bengal has been there in elections since 1970s. And Bihar also, I think, but West Bengal is a classic case. Violence in West Bengal is not new at all. As far as Andhra Pradesh is concerned, I told you that the polls are very close. And don't forget that the Election Commission had transferred the Chief Secretary of the state and also transferred the Director General of Intelligence. So everybody knew that violence is going to be there in the state. So all these are known. But I think over the years, this occurrence of violence has gone up very sharply, and the political polarization between different parties have been very sharp. So there is no consensus. In that way, you are right. We have to take a stock of what is happening. Why the civil society organization like ADR should also get into this and say, look, in this way, we can't hold elections which is marred by so much violence. Because now if you don't take action, the next elections will be even more violent and even more disruptive. In fact, this has to be thought of. Of course, the basic thing nobody is talking about. Obviously, violence will take place because you don't increase the number of seats in Lok Sabha, which is still at 543 as it was in 1971. In the meanwhile, the population of the country has gone up so many times. So if you don't want violence and don't want so much money, then increase the number of seats in Lok Sabha to 1500, make smaller constituencies, and then you will see violence come down. But yes, as I said, you have to take a look at this whole scenario very carefully.
Yes, point well taken. And actually, that's a very interesting point.
And we can't let this go on.
Mr. Sundaram, do you agree with that idea that if we perhaps create more constituencies, that could impact and reduce violence?
Are you asking me?
No, that question was for Rajesh Sundaram.
Oh, well, I think that, until there is a political will, things will not change. If you ask me if there's political will, even with smaller constituencies, will the politicians be less desperate? Wouldn't it be a lot of things at stake? I think till there's political will, till the voters tell the politicians that this is not acceptable, by not voting for them, it will continue. You can have 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 constituencies, but till the time the mindset of the politicians changes, the political will is there to eliminate violence, this will continue. And I think a big part has to be played by the voters, by rejecting people with criminal backgrounds, with these kind of tendencies, and whose plan includes violence. And we all know who these politicians are, who these parties are. We know that if you ask me if there's
Yes. No, I just wanted to say to that, Mr. Sundaram, but more often than not these days, it's the choice between, or you have to figure out which is the lesser of the two evils. Now, you say don't vote for such people or don't vote for such parties, but often and more I hear these conversations around me where people are wondering about who to really vote for, because all of them are, corrupt, or all of them are goons, or all of them are non-performing, inefficient candidates of the same level. So you don't know which one to choose. And if you, so where does this stop? I mean, effectively, even in Andhra Pradesh, for example, today, if TDP and YSRCP are both equally involved in this kind of a clash and violence, then who do you choose? What does the voter do? Mr. Malik, coming to you next.
Well, then this scenario would continue. There will be violence election after election, and you can have many constituencies. You can put more solutions, but till there is political will to change, my personal opinion is that very little will.
Yes, no, I agree with you. And Mr. Raman Malik, I think this is a very depressing part that a lot of voters in our country are dealing with. And I hear this very often, that people don't know. Even in the last round of assembly elections, people were standing in the queue and they weren't able to decide because they didn't know which one was worse and which one was better. Will we ever be able to get out of this vicious cycle?
Tanvi, before I answer your question, let me put two things very clear. One, I have forwarded you a tweet where a link of what you said was wrongly claimed by a candidate from BJP about the remarks on women of a particular community voting wrongly under the burqas. I have sent you a link, you can see that. Second, the sweeping remark that every politician is corrupt, bagged and doing wrong practices is a very irresponsible statement. There are a lot of people.
Yes, so I didn't say every politician is.
Good work.
I said a lot of voters are struggling with this dilemma today. So a large percentage of the politicians are.
No. This was before you asked the question. Before you asked this question, there was this sweeping remark from you. But anyways, coming to this, see, at the end of the day, these people are not somebody who have been manufactured in some factory somewhere outside. They are part of the society. And today, once we are going in this poll and we are heading towards the 75th year of our independence, our becoming a country, we must ask our questions to ourselves that once we are going in for a political system, how are we going to put the onus onto ourselves,
Yes.
asking that why this thing is happening now, and not just to the political, because political, there could be a very few people who are into politics, but it is the people who vote. It is a billion plus population that votes, and we must have a collective consciousness that asks this question: what is my candidate going to be? Is he engulfed in some sort of corrupt practices? Forget today if we start questioning whether the person
Correct.
is morally
No, Mr.
correct
Malik,
or not,
I understand
before
that
we
obviously
need to
at the
ask
end of the day, a
how
big
much
part of the
corruption has been
responsibility
done?
here is also on the voter. But when the options are, aren't that great, what does a voter do? Maybe now the Election Commission needs to get serious about the impact of using nota. And if a large percentage of people do choose that option of not voting for any of the candidates, then maybe those candidates need to be disqualified. There has to be some impact for me to make the choice of not voting for any of my candidates. Perhaps that will help clean up the system. I'm going to thank all of our panelists, but I want to make one point very clear. And we're going to play out the visuals that we got from Siachen today. Look at the dedication of our soldiers. At the world's highest battlefield, Siachen is the world's highest battlefield. In those weather conditions, our soldiers and the Election Commission machinery ensured that they get a chance to vote, because that is how much this country values the right to vote and respects the duty to vote for the country. And look at these soldiers. I think our netas should be ashamed tonight, because while our citizens, even those guarding our borders and fighting the enemy in Siachen, were voting, our netas were busy resorting to violence, to vandalism and cash for votes. Absolutely disgusting. We do not deserve such politicians. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us on this debate.